The screen suddenly lit up with a message that felt different from anything you had seen before. Not loud. Not chaotic. But heavy. A single sentence appeared first. 3 hours remain before a financial turning point reaches your life. You stared at those words for a moment. Because the message did not speak about random luck or ordinary events. It spoke about a shift. A moment that could change the direction of someone's future. And then another line appeared. Michael says the window of preparation has already opened. The message explained that many people ignore these moments. Not because they want to. But because they assume nothing important is happening. And that assumption is exactly how opportunities pass unnoticed. Why the message appeared now? According to the reflection, the warning was not about fear. It was about awareness. Because financial struggles often don't begin suddenly. They build slowly through years of missed signals, overlooked opportunities, and decisions made without clarity. But sometimes a moment appears when everything can shift. A moment when someone pauses and asks themselves an honest question. Am I paying attention to the direction my life is moving? The message suggested that this was one of those moments. The 3-hour window. Another paragraph appeared on the screen. 3 hours may sound like a short time. But the reflection explained something surprising. Some of the most important changes in life begin in small windows of time. A decision made in minutes can redirect years of someone's future. A realization that appears in one evening can change the way someone thinks forever. And the message suggested that the next 3 hours were not about panic. They were about reflection. Because when someone pauses long enough to recognize where they truly want to go, the next step often becomes clear. The symbol of guidance. The message again mentioned the symbol of Archangel Michael, often associated with courage and protection. Not as a warning meant to frighten anyone, but as a reminder that guidance sometimes arrives in the form of awareness. Moments when a person is invited to look at their life honestly. To consider what they want to build. And to take a step toward the future they truly desire. The extended reflection. At the bottom of the screen another note appeared. The message you were reading was part of a longer reflection about financial awareness, responsibility, and recognizing opportunities when they appear. Readers who wanted to see the entire message together could open it through the QR code shown with the reflection or the link connected to it, where every chapter of the message had been gathered into one place. Some people prefer exploring reflection step by step like this. Others prefer seeing the complete message all at once. Both lead to the same understanding. The thought for this moment. Before the message paused again, it asked something important. If an opportunity to change your direction appeared tonight, would you recognize it? Because sometimes the difference between staying stuck and moving forward is simply noticing the moment when change becomes possible. One word for this part. If you are following the reflection, leave one word in the comments that represents the mindset needed when someone wants to transform their future. The word for this part is awareness. Because awareness is the first step toward any meaningful change. Say, Chapter 2 continue. Part 2. The second message that appeared when the clock started moving faster. A few seconds passed after the first warning. The screen went quiet again. But something about the silence felt strange, almost like the message was waiting for you to fully understand what had already been said. Then another line slowly appeared. 2 hours and 53 minutes remain. The message was counting. Not like a countdown meant to scare someone, but like a reminder that time moves whether we notice it or not. And the reflection continued. Michael says most people lose their financial opportunities not because they are unlucky, but because they ignore the moments meant to wake them up. The pattern most people never notice. The message explained that many people spend years wondering why their financial situation never changes. They work hard. They try different things. But something always feels stuck. And according to the reflection, the reason is surprisingly simple. Many people focus only on working harder. But they rarely pause long enough to change the direction of their thinking. Because when someone continues walking the same path every day, they usually arrive at the same destination. But when someone stops and reevaluates where they are going, that is when real change begins. The warning Michael was referring to. Another paragraph appeared on the screen. The financial event mentioned earlier is not a disaster waiting to happen. It is a moment when someone must decide whether they will continue repeating the same habits or step into a new mindset. The message explained that opportunities appear quietly. They don't always arrive with excitement or celebration. Sometimes they appear as simple realizations. Moments when a person suddenly understands what they must do differently. And that realization can be powerful enough to transform an entire future. The moment most people ignore. The reflection then asked something important. How many times have people felt a strong inner push to improve their situation, but ignored it? Maybe they told themselves they would start tomorrow. Maybe they assumed they needed more time. Maybe they simply didn't believe change was possible. But the truth the message shared was simple. The future doesn't change on its own. It changes when someone decides that the direction of their life matters enough to take action. The extended message hidden in the reflection. At the bottom of the screen, another section appeared explaining that the message being revealed in parts was only one way to experience the reflection. The entire message had also been gathered together for readers who preferred seeing the full story in one place. Anyone curious about the complete reflection could open it through the QR code shown with the message or the link connected to it, where every chapter appears together. Some people prefer reading reflections slowly. Others prefer exploring the full message immediately. Both lead to the same understanding. The question that matters right now. Before the screen paused again, another sentence appeared. If you were given the chance to shift your financial direction tonight, would you recognize it or overlook it? Because the greatest opportunities rarely shout for attention. They appear quietly. And only those paying attention truly see them. One word for this part. If you are following this reflection, leave a word in the comments that represents the mindset required to move toward a better future. The word for this part is decision. Because the moment someone decides to change their direction, everything else begins to follow. Say, Chapter 3. Part 3. The hidden financial pattern Michael revealed. For a few seconds, the screen stayed completely still again. The reflection had already spoken about awareness. It had already explained why many people miss the moments that could change their future. But something still felt unfinished. Then another sentence slowly appeared. 2 hours and 37 minutes remain. The message continued. Michael says the event coming in 3 hours is not random. It is connected to a pattern most people never notice. The pattern that keeps people stuck. The reflection explains something many people never realize. Financial struggles often repeat themselves not because someone is unlucky, but because they unknowingly follow the same pattern over and over again. Wake up. Work. Worry. Repeat. Days turn into months. Months turn into years. And slowly the belief begins to grow that life will never change. But the message suggested something very important. Patterns can be broken the moment someone recognizes them. Because once you see the cycle clearly, you gain the power to step outside of it. Why the warning was sent. Another paragraph appeared. Michael says the warning was never about fear. It was about preparation. Because sometimes people reach a moment where everything can change. But only if they notice it. Only if they pause long enough to question the direction they are moving. Many people assume financial improvement requires sudden miracles. But the reflection explained that transformation often begins with a simple shift in mindset. Seeing possibilities where fear once existed. Recognizing opportunities where doubt once lived. And choosing growth instead of remaining comfortable in struggle. The real meaning of the event. The message then revealed something deeper. The scary event mentioned earlier was not about disaster. It was about a moment of realization. A moment when someone understands that staying in the same mindset will keep them in the same situation forever. But choosing a new direction can open doors they never noticed before. And that realization can feel intense. Because truth often feels uncomfortable before it becomes empowering. The reflection hidden behind the message. At the bottom of the screen another explanation appeared. The message you were reading had been divided into chapters so readers could pause and think about each idea. But the complete reflection had also been gathered in one place for anyone who wanted to explore the entire message together. Readers could open the full reflection through the QR code shown with the message or the link connected to it, where every chapter appears in order. Some people prefer discovering messages step by step. Others prefer seeing the whole reflection immediately. Both reveal the same lesson. The question that changes everything. Before the screen paused again, one final thought appeared. If the next 3 hours could help you see your financial future differently, would you be willing to listen? Because sometimes the difference between struggle and progress is simply recognizing the moment when change becomes possible. One word for this part. If you are still following the reflection, leave a word in the comments that represents the mindset needed to break old patterns. The word for this part is change. Because change begins the moment someone believes their future can become different. Say, Chapter 4 continue. Part 4. The hour Michael said most people waste. The screen dimmed for a moment again. 3 chapters had already passed. You had read about the warning. You had understood the pattern that traps people in the same financial struggles. You had seen the message explaining that a moment of realization could change everything. But the next line that appeared felt heavier than the others. 2 hours and 11 minutes remain. Then another sentence slowly formed underneath it. Michael says the next hour is the hour most people waste. The hour when people ignore the signs. According to the reflection, something strange happens when people receive warnings about their future. At first they pay attention. They read carefully. They feel curious. But after a few minutes, their minds start to wander. They assume the message will continue later. They tell themselves they will think about it tomorrow. And that exact moment is when most opportunities disappear. Because opportunities rarely wait for someone who is distracted. They move forward with those who are paying attention. The moment of inner resistance. The message explains something that many people experience but rarely notice. Whenever a person begins to think seriously about changing their life, something inside them pushes back. Doubt appears. Fear appears. Thoughts like, what if nothing actually changes? What if this is just another message like the others? And those thoughts slowly convince someone to ignore the moment. But the reflection explained that this resistance is completely normal. Because the mind prefers familiar struggles over unfamiliar change. The question Michael wanted you to ask yourself. Another paragraph appeared on the screen. If your life remained exactly the same 5 years from now, would you truly be satisfied? That question stopped many readers in their tracks. Because it forced them to imagine something uncomfortable. The possibility that nothing might change unless they decide to change something themselves. And that is exactly why the reflection exists. Not to scare people, but to encourage them to look honestly at the direction their life is moving. Why the 3-hour window matters. The message then returned to the timeline mentioned earlier. 3 hours. Not because something supernatural would suddenly happen, but because 3 hours is long enough for someone to truly reflect. To think deeply. To ask themselves questions they normally avoid. Questions like, what future am I actually building? What habits are keeping me stuck? What could I start doing differently today? And those reflections can lead to powerful decisions. The complete reflection. At the bottom of the screen the message explained something again. The story had been divided into chapters so readers could pause between ideas. But the entire reflection had also been gathered together for anyone who wanted to explore the complete message in one place. Readers could open it through the QR code shown with the reflection or the link connected to it, where every chapter appears together. Some people prefer reading step by step. Others prefer seeing the full reflection immediately. Both paths lead to the same message. The real warning. Before the screen paused again, the final sentence of this chapter appeared. Michael says the real danger is not poverty. The real danger is living an entire life without realizing you had the power to change it. And that realization is often what motivates someone to begin a new direction. One word for this part. If you are still following the reflection, leave a word in the comments that represents what people must overcome before they can transform their future. The word for this part is doubt. Because doubt is often the barrier standing between someone and the life they want to create. Say, Chapter 5 continue. Part 5. The message that appeared when only 1 hour remained. The screen stayed quiet again. For chapters had already unfolded. You had seen the warning. You had understood the pattern that traps people financially. You had read about the hour many people waste because of doubt. But something about the silence now felt different. Heavier. More urgent. Then the screen flickered again. A new line slowly appeared. 1 hour and 42 minutes remain. And beneath it another message followed. Michael says the moment people begin to understand their situation, they often feel uncomfortable. The moment awareness feels uncomfortable. The reflection explained that realization is rarely easy. When someone truly looks at their life honestly, they sometimes see things they avoided noticing before. Habits that waste time. Decisions that delayed progress. Opportunities that passed quietly because they were ignored. And at first that awareness can feel discouraging. But the message explains something powerful. Awareness is not meant to shame you. It is meant to wake you up. Because the moment someone becomes aware of their direction, they also gain the power to change it. Why the warning mentioned poverty. Another paragraph appeared. The message clarified that the warning about staying trapped in poverty was not meant as a curse. It was a reflection. Because many people unknowingly trap themselves in financial struggle by repeating the same patterns every day. Working without planning. Spending without thinking. Dreaming without taking action. And years later they wonder why nothing improved. But the reflection said something important. The future changes the moment someone decides their direction matters. The turning point in every success story. The message then explained that every successful person experiences a moment like this. A moment when they realize the life they want will not appear automatically. They must build it intentionally. That moment becomes the turning point. The moment when someone stops drifting and begins steering their life with purpose. And that turning point often begins with a simple decision. A decision to think differently. To act differently. To believe that progress is possible. The hidden lesson behind the message. The reflection reminded readers that the message was not about supernatural promises. It was about perspective. Because financial growth often begins with mindset before it appears in reality. When someone begins thinking strategically, learning continuously, and acting consistently, their situation begins to shift. Slowly at first. Then faster than they expected. The extended reflection. At the bottom of the screen another note appeared. The message you were reading was part of a longer reflection about financial awareness, discipline, and recognizing opportunities. Readers who wished to explore the full message could open it through the QR code shown with the reflection or the link connected to it, where every chapter of the message had been gathered together. Some people prefer discovering messages step by step like this. Others prefer exploring the full reflection at once. Both lead to the same understanding. The question that matters most. Before the screen paused again, another thought appeared. If your future improved dramatically 5 years from now, what decision would you wish you had made tonight? Because the choices people make today often shape the reality they experience later. One word for this part. If you are still following the reflection, leave one word in the comments that represents the mindset needed to build a better future. The word for this part is discipline. Because discipline is the bridge between dreams and real progress. Say, Chapter 6 continue. Part 6. The moment when only 1 hour remained. The screen dimmed again. 5 chapters had already unfolded. You had read about awareness. You had seen the pattern that traps people financially. You had understood why doubt and hesitation cause so many opportunities to disappear. But the message wasn't finished. A new line appeared slowly. 1 hour and 12 minutes remain. The reflection continued. Michael says this is the moment when people either wake up, or return to the same life they were living before. The hour that defines direction. The message explains something powerful. Most people think their future is determined by luck. But according to the reflection, the truth is different. The direction of someone's life is often decided in quiet moments like this. Moments when no one else is watching. Moments when someone asks themselves a difficult question. Do I truly want my life to change, or am I simply hoping it will? Because hope without action rarely creates transformation. But clarity followed by action often does. Why people ignore turning points. Another paragraph appeared. The reflection explained that many people actually experience moments that could transform their lives. But they ignore them. Not because they are lazy, but because change feels uncertain. The mind prefers familiar routines, even difficult ones, because they feel predictable. But growth always requires stepping into something unfamiliar. That is why turning points often feel uncomfortable. They require courage. The hidden meaning behind the warning. The message returned to the earlier warning about the financial event. And it explained something deeper. The event was not something happening outside of you. It was something happening inside your perspective. A moment when you realize that staying exactly where you are will lead to the same results again and again. But changing your mindset and direction can create completely different outcomes. And that realization can be powerful. Because once someone understands it, they cannot go back to thinking the same way again. The moment when people decide their future. The reflection described something interesting. Successful people often remember a single moment when they decided their life would be different. Not when money appeared. Not when success arrived. But when they decided they would no longer accept the direction they were currently moving. That decision became the beginning of everything else. Because once someone decides to grow, they start learning. They start building. They start seeing opportunities they never noticed before. The extended reflection. At the bottom of the message another explanation appeared. The reflection had been shared in chapters so readers could pause and think about each idea. But the complete message had also been gathered in one place for anyone who wanted to see the entire reflection together. Readers could open it through the QR code shown with the message or the link connected to it, where every chapter appears as one continuous story. Some people prefer reading step by step. Others prefer exploring the full message immediately. Both lead to the same understanding. The question that changes everything. Before the screen paused again, the final sentence appeared. If tonight became the moment when you finally decided to change your financial future, what would you do differently starting tomorrow? Because the future rarely changes suddenly. It changes because someone begins thinking and acting differently one day at a time. One word for this part. If you are still following the reflection, leave one word in the comments that represents the mindset required to move forward when change feels uncertain. The word for this part is courage. Because courage is what allows someone to move beyond fear and build a better future. Say, Chapter 7 continue. Part 7. The final hour, when the message became impossible to ignore. The screen stayed still again. 6 chapters had already passed. You had seen the warning about time. You had understood the pattern that keeps people financially trapped. You had read about doubt, discipline, and courage. But the reflection was approaching its final moment. Then the screen flickered again. A new sentence appeared slowly. 49 minutes remain. And beneath it another line appeared. Michael says this is the moment most people decide whether they will ignore the message, or finally pay attention. The turning point most people never reach. The reflection explained that many people encounter moments that could completely change their direction. But very few take those moments seriously. Why? Because transformation does not always arrive with excitement or celebration. Sometimes it arrives quietly. A message. A thought. A realization that something in life must change. But if someone dismisses that moment, life simply continues the same way it always has. That is why the message repeated the warning. Not to frighten anyone, but to make sure the moment was noticed. The financial event Michael was referring to. Another paragraph appeared. The event Michael revealed is not a disaster. It is a decision point. A moment where someone either continues following old patterns or begins building a new path. Because financial progress rarely appears suddenly. It grows slowly through decisions. Learning new skills. Managing money carefully. Creating opportunities instead of waiting for them. And those habits begin the moment someone decides their future matters enough to change their actions. Why many people stay trapped. The reflection explained that people remain trapped in financial struggle for one simple reason. They believe change is impossible. But that belief becomes a self-fulfilling pattern. When someone believes nothing will improve, they stop searching for better paths. They stop learning. They stop trying new approaches. And years pass without progress. But the moment someone believes improvement is possible, their behavior begins to change. And when behavior changes, results eventually follow. The hidden opportunity in the message. The reflection suggested something powerful. This moment was not about predicting the future. It was about giving someone the opportunity to pause. To ask themselves what kind of life they truly want to build. Because the future is rarely shaped by chance alone. It is shaped by consistent decisions made over time. And tonight might simply be the moment someone realizes they are ready to make those decisions differently. The complete reflection. At the bottom of the screen another message appeared. The reflection had been divided into chapters so readers could pause between ideas. But the complete message had also been placed together for those who wanted to see the entire reflection in one place. Readers could explore the full message through the QR code shown with the story or the link connected to it, where every chapter appears together. Some people prefer reading slowly. Others prefer seeing everything at once. Both lead to the same insight. The question that matters right now. Before the screen paused again, one final thought appeared. If the next year could become the year your financial life truly improved, what would you begin doing differently tonight? Because every successful future begins with a single moment when someone decides to change their direction. One word for this part. If you are still following the reflection, leave one word in the comments that represents the belief required to create a better future. The word for this part is possibility. Because the moment someone believes improvement is possible, their journey toward it begins. Say, Chapter 8 continue. Part 8. The last 30 minutes, the moment the message became personal. The screen went dark for a moment. 7 chapters had already unfolded. You had read about the warning. You had seen the pattern that traps people financially. You had understood why doubt, fear, and hesitation stop most people from changing their direction. But now the message felt different. The reflection was no longer speaking about people in general. It began speaking directly to you. Then a new line appeared. 29 minutes remain. Another sentence followed immediately. Michael says the moment has now become personal. The question you cannot avoid. The message explains something that many readers had been trying to avoid. This reflection was not simply a story. It was a mirror. A mirror showing the direction someone's life might be moving if nothing changes. And the reflection asked a question that felt impossible to ignore. If your financial life looked exactly the same 5 years from now, would you truly be satisfied? Many people avoid answering that question honestly. Because deep down they already know the answer. They want something better. They want stability. They want the freedom that comes from financial peace. But wanting something is not enough. Change begins when someone becomes honest about what must improve. The truth Michael was revealing. Another paragraph appeared. Michael says the real trap is not poverty. The real trap is believing that your situation cannot change. Because once someone believes improvement is impossible, they stop searching for solutions. They stop learning new skills. They stop exploring opportunities. And slowly their future becomes smaller than it could have been. But the moment someone chooses to believe that progress is possible, their mindset begins to expand again. And when the mind expands, opportunities often appear where they were invisible before. Why the message mentioned a scary event? The reflection clarified something important. The event mentioned earlier was not a supernatural disaster waiting to happen. It was the realization that life will remain exactly the same unless someone chooses to move in a new direction. And that realization can feel scary. Because it means accepting responsibility for the future we create. But it is also empowering. Because once someone realizes they have the power to change their path, they are no longer trapped by their past. The full reflection. At the bottom of the screen another explanation appeared. The reflection had been revealed in chapters so readers could pause and think about each message. But the complete reflection had also been gathered in one place for those who wanted to see the entire story together. Readers could open it through the QR code shown with the message or the link connected to it, where every chapter appears in order. Some people prefer discovering ideas gradually. Others prefer reading the entire reflection immediately. Both reveal the same lesson. The final question before the last chapter. Before the screen paused again, the final sentence of this chapter appeared. If tonight became the moment when you decided to change your direction, what would be the very first step you would take tomorrow? Because every meaningful transformation begins with a single step. And that step begins with a decision. One word for this part. If you are still following the reflection, leave one word in the comments that represents the belief needed to transform your future. The word for this part is choice. Because the direction of your life ultimately depends on the choices you make. Say, Chapter 9 continue. Part 9. The last 10 minutes, when the message became impossible to ignore. For a moment the screen stayed completely still again. 8 chapters had already appeared. You had seen the warning about time. You had read about the financial patterns people repeat for years. You had understood how doubt, hesitation, and fear quietly trap people in the same life. But now the message felt different. This was no longer a reflection meant to slowly guide someone. This was the moment where the message became direct. Then the screen flickered again. A new line appeared. 10 minutes remain. And another sentence followed. Michael says most people ignore the message even when they know it matters. The moment people walk away. The reflection explains something surprising. When people reach the final moments of an important realization, many of them turn away. Not because they didn't understand the message, but because understanding it requires them to change something. And change can feel uncomfortable. It requires someone to question habits, to examine decisions, to admit that certain patterns may have kept them stuck longer than they realized. But the message explained something powerful. Ignoring truth does not erase it. It simply delays the moment when someone eventually faces it again. The financial event Michael was referring to. The reflection returned to the warning that began the story. The scary financial event. But now the meaning was clearer. The event was not about a sudden disaster. It was about a moment of realization. A moment when someone understands that the life they are living today will likely continue exactly the same tomorrow unless they change something. And that realization can feel intense, because it removes the illusion that change will magically happen on its own. The decision that creates a new direction. The reflection explained that every successful person experiences a moment like this. A moment when they stop drifting through life and begin directing it. That moment rarely feels dramatic. It often happens quietly. Someone decides they will learn new skills. Someone decides they will manage money differently. Someone decides they will build opportunities instead of waiting for them. And slowly those decisions transform their future. Why the message repeated the warning. The reflection explained why the message continued reminding readers about time. Not because a magical event would happen when the clock reached 0. But because urgency forces people to pay attention. When time feels limited, people think more carefully about their choices. And sometimes that urgency helps someone finally take the first step toward improvement. The complete reflection. At the bottom of the screen another note appeared. The reflection had been revealed in chapters so readers could pause and think about each idea. But the complete message had also been placed together for those who wanted to explore the entire reflection in one place. Readers could open it through the QR code shown with the message or the link connected to it, where every chapter appears in order. Some people prefer reading step by step. Others prefer seeing the entire reflection at once. Both lead to the same understanding. The final question before the ending. Before the screen paused again, one final question appeared. If tonight became the moment when you decided your financial future mattered, what action would you begin tomorrow morning? Because every meaningful change begins with one honest decision. One word for this part. If you are still following the reflection, leave one word in the comments that represents the mindset required to move forward. The word for this part is action. Because awareness without action cannot transform a life. Say, final chapter continue.